everyone, and welcome to our, I guess, Panda and Alex stare at Steven Universe and complain. As usual,
Yes.
I'm Panda. We're doing episodes in a row, so I'm still Falin, the fictive. I am here to discuss the plurality at hand with Steven Universe, which we still haven't gone to, so we're just going to have to hold on that. And this is Alex.
Hello.
Okay, so we have here season one, episode two, Laser Light Cannon. Let's just get started with the synopsis real fast. Uh, basically, while Steve and Amethyst are munching on some leftover fry bits, they call the bits, served by a character who honestly and genuinely looks like a character I would design if any one listening is familiar with our character designs. But in the sky, a large, honestly, it looked really massive. We don't really get the full scale and size of it, but a massive, large eyeball, a kind of mechanical looking device was floating in the sky, appearing to observe Beach City, which was apparently going to do catastrophic damage. So the crystal gems needed to take it down, but the only thing that could is an old cannon owned by Rose Quartz. This is the first mention of her. Rose Quartz is Steven's mother. Um,
His
we can
deceased mother.
deceased mother. We can get into that a little bit after the synopsis, but basically, Stephen thinks that the cannon might be with Greg, his dad, who basically lives in a van and owns a car wash. So he's not really an amazingly successful guy, but he still loves his son. So we all can appreciate that. Um, they go into they go into a old storage unit. They discuss and eventually manage to find the cannon. The rest of the episode is them managing to drag it back to the beach, and honestly, a funny gag where the actual cart that they use is too fragile for it, so it just immediately crashes through. But since they don't have anything, they just let it skid across the ground anyway. Until they fire at the giant. They call it a red eye. I don't know if they said it was a machine, but it manages to explode and cause a bunch of debris to land on Beach City.
It is heavily implied to be a machine.
It did have the like machine shutter kind of eye look, so it is at the very least heavily implied. To start out this episode, we have our first confirmed queer character. The shirt fired from the t-shirt cannon with "buy t-shirts" cannons on it.
Bisexual mother freaking t shirt cannons.
That's what that means, right? I've been in the dungeon for a while, so I need to make
Yes.
sure I clear. Oh, okay, yes. First queer character, bisexual T-shirt fired out of a cannon. Very good. So when I recapped this episode, I kind of noticed that it was kind of a very simple like premise and execution. So the synopsis, but I do actually have a few things that I'd like to discuss and talk about. Uh, First and foremost, my first note, I want to appreciate while it can't, well, I believe we still have it, is that the backgrounds and style of Steven Universe Season 1, I still really think it's quite beautiful. I love the background elements where a bunch of light rays are coming down. You could see the intensity of the light hues change across the scenery. And I think it's just a really pretty backgrounds this episode. It's also the first time we see, I don't exactly know what you would call this, but Steven Universe, at least in the first season, first couple seasons, if I remember, had a tendency to go into a, I don't know what you'd call it, like when the red eye is descending, the basically the entire background goes
A palette
red hue.
switch.
Yes, the palette switch. I kind of associate it with SU a lot because I feel that it was very effective early on. Again, I haven't seen it later on, so I can't exactly say.
Oh, Jill, baby girl, it gets so bad.
Oh,
I should
I'm
actually
so
address
sorry.
you as your alter name now because that's what you specifically requested. Fallen, baby girl, it gets really bad.
I see. Well, I still wish to appreciate it while it's here
Yeah, we
because I
should. We
am
really should.
fallen.
The work
I
of the
have figured.
crew during the Palais switches is phenomenal, and we should give them credit where it's due because it'll get bad. It's gonna get pretty bad.
Well, it's very interesting. I do think it was very effective here. The animation of the cannon firing, especially how it unloaded into a from a typical looking cannon to more of a rose flower shape, was a very cute stylistic design. I feel that I love that aesthetic quality to it. What else do we have here? We mentioned Rose Quartz, Steven's mom. I think it's a good to. Alex paused the episode the moment Rose Quartz was mentioned, and I thought it was so funny because it reminded me of one of the that anime girl meme of the like Wisconsin mention, woo, and she's got like the beer or like some object from Wisconsin in her hand. That was Alex right then. Rose Quartz mentioned.
Well, it's just very important to to have an aside to talk about Rose Quartz because quite frankly, she is one of the most important characters of the show. She is the whole reason the story kicked off in the first place. Everything around Steven Universe basically lives in the shadow of this very controversial character. And I'm not talking about fandom discussions. I'm talking about controversial like in the text of the show itself. She is extremely controversial. Not only
Oh
because of
yeah.
her actions, but because of the circumstances surrounding this character as well, which we cannot get into right now.
At the very least, we can start on a point that I noted that how Rose Quartz is deceased at this point, supposedly,
Yeah,
and how that's.
you guys don't know this, and I'm gonna tell you it right now. But I basically begged Jill to like talk about the childbirth thing that we were talking about when we were watching the shorts. Which,
Oh
by the way,
yes.
aren't going to be a thing. We're not going to re-record the shorts and watch them for y'all. Uh, that's not happening.
Oh yeah, that's perfectly fine. I mean, it doesn't really add much continuity with, and those are mostly reactions. But yes, with Rose Quartz, something that we originally recalled was it's so how it's explained is that essentially Rose Quartz died by giving up her gem to give to Stephen. The crystal in Stephen's stomach is the original gem that housed Rose Quartz power and such like that. And I think this is interesting because like obviously in a Watsonian perspective, this is giving up your form for your child, but from a Doyleist perspective, this is a very fantasy, more child friendly way to tackle and grapple with uh, living with a parent that has died in childbirth when they give birth to their child. That was a little redundant, but regardless, I find it interesting the parallel that is between these two and uh, simply how it's kind of a high fantasy way to tackle such an approach that would make it more acceptable for audiences on, say, Cartoon Network.
Yeah, broadcast audiences.
Yeah, well, that's really mostly what Rose Quartz is about right now. There, you could possibly see the fact that she had cannons to be an implication for future reference. Like, why does she have a cannon? That seems pretty intense. But they are like defenders of the earth, so it's not that out of the question. But we'll get into that. I would like to talk about Greg next, Steven's dad. Do you have any thoughts about Greg, Alex?
Do I have any thoughts about Greg? For the most there's actually quite a bit that I can't discuss with him right now. The only thing I can really say is that during the later half of this show, it becomes clear to the audience that he and Rose Quartz had something of a similar upbringing, and it's implied that that's why they bonded as well as they did.
That's true. In the episode, it is clarified that Greg was at one point was a musician, uh, and at one of his concerts, the only one to attend was Rose Quartz, and ever since then, they just kept together until Steven came into the picture. Um, I like Greg in this episode. I think that this is a good connection back to human culture, where he feels like a very realistic depiction of someone who's not as naive as Steven, grappling with the intensity of the crystal gems' lives crossing over into human culture. There's one thing that I noted at the beginning of the episode that was interesting is that when they were getting like French fries and like they were next to human culture, very casual, it almost sounded like Animal Crossing music was playing in the background, which I thought was very interesting, like a lot more natural sounding instruments, would you say, Alex? Like much more
What did I think? Yeah, it sounded like something I would hear if I was playing Animal Crossing New Leaf.
Yeah, I can't fully recall, but when I was thinking about the music when the problems with the red eye machine came in, there was more synth and tech. Was there more synth and techno tones that came
I
on,
would say
if I'm
that,
not
yeah.
mistaken? Yeah, so I think it's interesting
The
that
music does a good
musically,
job of conveying the feel and weight of scenes.
yeah, and I was appreciating how it kind of has a different style when gem related activities and scenarios are
I
happening.
believe that was intentional because of what the gems are, and we can't talk about that until we really get into like the meat of those episodes.
But
But
it
this is
is,
basically foreshadowing for what the gems are and what's to come. And I should
oh
also
yes,
say the red eye, I mean, it's called an eye. It's all but stated to be a surveillance machine for the a very quiet plot at this point in time that's happening underneath our feet.
and I did already mention that its eye had a shutter like quality to it that you can expect in cameras and the like. Oh,
Yeah.
heck of it.
That is it is
Uh,
very clearly a surveillance robot.
for sure. Um, the last thing that I noted is something that you brought up earlier, Alex, was the gems, but more so Pearl especially, seems very dismissive of humans and human culture.
Yet that is
This
actually my
is,
last note for this episode. This is
yes,
if you didn't see the pilot, this is where you will notice the general dismissiveness about human culture that the gems have, which signifies to them not being of the culture.
yes, Pearl especially. It seems to be that Greg is the main figure of connecting back to human culture that the gems, mostly Pearl, are dismissive of. And you could possibly see this as foreshadowing for how Pearl feels about Greg and Rose, but it does show a sort of otherworldliness to the gems that shows that they have a disconnect to humans that could possibly impact Steven's perception of the world and such like that. I don't know if they mentioned this, but in the pilot episode, they very casually dropped that the gems are like thousands of years old. And I think it's worth mentioning that considering the pilot came out before the show released. You could watch the pilot. So,
Yeah, that was available for people to watch.
yeah,
It
so
was
it's
released publicly. Fortunately for us, Cartoon Network did a very cool thing by releasing the pilot. And I don't know if we ever went into this at any point,
Wait, what's
but
that? What's
pilots
it's
being
Cartoon
released.
Network. It's Cartoon Network. They're canceling the pilot. They're writing it off as a tax off. Oh no!
Uh-oh.
Oh no!
But also, like, pilots aren't meant to like aren't meant for public consumption. That is usually only for the network to see if they want to move forward with funding a season of the show. And also what Jill
Yeah.
said, tax write-off. Falin said what Falin said, tax write-off.
Ah, thank you for remembering.
Well,
But
I'm
yeah,
always so used to calling you Jill, but I have to remember that when we're doing these
yeah.
podcasts to always
It's
address you as the alter that's fronting.
well, you can mix it up. I mean, part of the reason why we're emphasizing the altars is because of the element that will become more relevant as the show goes on, and it'll help reinforce the theme and what I'm specifically bringing to the conversation when it comes to Steven Universe,
I mean, you're
which
not just here because you're an alter. You were only like the only person I could trust to be normal about this show. Like,
that is a good point.
yeah.
Yeah, I personally think that this was another pretty solid episode. It's another good setup episode, focusing more on exposition and getting to know the state of the world before we really start digging into the meat of Steven Universe.
Yeah. And boy, it's gonna be like filet mignon when we get there. For those who don't know, that's French steak. And guess what? They serve you very tiny portions of it. And it's also really expensive.
Wow, just like Ratatouille. Uh,
Yeah, that's also like relevant for
we'll
reasons that we haven't talked about.
we'll get there when we get there.
If we ever get there, can we talk about that?
Technically, it's not swearing.
That's true.
But regardless, I think is that all you had about laser light cannon? Because I'm kind of out of things to say about. Yeah, that's all I got about it.
Yeah, it hints towards the greater plot elements. Rose Quartz mentioned. There's also Greg and the Gem's general dismissiveness of human culture. If you didn't watch the pilot, that those are the most important things that you're supposed to take from this episode. It's very solid. It's very beautiful, and treasure this while you have it because the show is not going to continue looking like this.
I almost wonder if you could see those 2 points as like the pilot's. Well, it wasn't really too emphasized in the pilot of like the gem's dismissiveness of human culture, but it feels very built up on the from the pilot, which is funny because it didn't really appear in the first episode. Is basically what I'm getting at is that this
Yeah.
element was removed in the first episode but came back in the second. I don't know. That's very fascinating to observe.
May have been. Who knows? We weren't there behind the scenes.
I was in high school. Actually, I think I was in middle school.
No, Jill. You know what happened? No, Fallen. You know what happened?
I fell.
You fell. Yes.
Ah,
You fell
jeez.
into the production staff's like meetings and then you were all like what was the point? I was making a joke but I forgot.
I'm sorry. I one up joked you. Unfortunately, and the train of thought
You one
collapsed.
up joked me. Yes, that's true. You did.
But yeah, I think that's all we got for this episode. As usual, I am Trans Panda. You can find me at TransPanda1 on Tumblr, currently fronting Fallen, the fictive. And this is Alex.
Hi, you don't want my social media.
And I respect that. And as always, it's his universe and we're living in it.
It's his universe.
Bye.
We're all living in it. Good night.
Good night. Bye.
If I could begin to be half of what you think of me, I could do about anything. I could even learn how to love like you.